Hello and welcome to Showtuned, a podcast about musicals and the craft of storytelling through song.
Each week, we explore the layers of ways that songs tell stories, from melodies to harmonies, lyrics to dialogue, characters to scenes, and how it all comes together in this truly unique medium where the songs are the engine of the story. I'm Brett Bowles. I'm a professional songwriter. I'm an educator and the creator of the hit TikTok and Instagram series, The MT, where I've been spilling the tea on why certain musical theater songs make us feel things, while also I've been helping songwriters hone their craft.
And I'm Josh Shelton. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a songwriter. I grew up a jazz musician, and I'm the founder of Counterpoint Musicals, which is a production company that is on a mission to reinvent the movie musical. So I'm so excited to talk about musicals with you, Brett. And this podcast is meant to be more than a conversation. It's an exploration for anyone who loves musicals. If you're a songwriter or a playwright or a performer or a storyteller or a theater kid, a Disney adult, an accompanist, or just a super fan, our goal is for you to find something interesting here, right?
Love it. Amen.
So today on the show, we're going to talk about song mapping. And Brett, we can talk more about that, but this came from you, and I'm so excited to talk to you specifically about song mapping.
Yeah, when we were initially discussing the ideas for this initial episode, the idea of what comes first came up, and I thought, wow, that's so interesting, because I happened to be talking to my students about song mapping, which is a pre-writing technique that can save a whole lot of time when it comes to writing songs. So I'm eager to talk about it. It's gonna be fun.
When we were talking about where to start, it was, well, let's start with the beginning of writing a song or writing a show. And song mapping, I think, is a great, unique technique that we can look at. But before we get into all that, I want to start this show with a segment we are calling My I Want Song for the Week. Brett, I want to hear what your I Want song would be this week. Do you have a phrase or a hook?
Before even I do that, should we educate people on what an I Want song is?
Yes.
Should we do that?
Let's do a very quick. I would love to hear your quick breakdown of what an I Want song is.
On the most basic level, an I Want song is a character establishment song, usually for the protagonist, though it can be for any character in the show, that really sets them off on their journey. It puts them into action. So that is the classic definition of an I Want or an I Am song.
And I love the journey.
Yes.
It's you're setting yourself for a journey. You want to go from A to B or wherever it is. And I think that's good for all of us to generally set some intention.
Yeah.
So what is your I Want song for this week?
So I think my I Want song for this week would be called something like Stand Still, because my world is moving so fast right now. So many things are happening and I'm so busy, and it never feels like there's enough hours in the day, that I feel like maybe wanting to just sort of stand still and take it all in for a minute would be nice for this week. So it's sort of my theme for the week, I think.
Love that as a hook. Stand still. When you can find a phrase like that as sort of the original idea for a song,
Mm-hmm.
I love that the word still has so much weight to it. When I start to think musically, How do you bring stillness to life? I can already hear, I'm getting chills. I want to hear that song.
I know, right? Maybe I should write it. But now it's your turn. Now you have to tell us what your I Want song for the week is.
So my I Want song for this week is Be Myself.
Okay.
Stand in my own sort of voice power. I don't quite have the hook yet, but it's Be Myself.
It's great. You can borrow one from Greatest Showman. This is me. Why not?
Yes. And also, actually, I think we should encourage everyone listening, what is your I Want song for the week or the month or the year? If you want to share what journey you want to go on, we'd love to hear it.
Please.
Right?
Yeah.
It's important to, connect with each other in community. And what better way to connect than share where we want to go or what we want to do.
One of the things I do with my students every week, pretty much, I run a songwriting education platform on school. And at the beginning of every week, usually on Sunday, I'll make a post and I'll say, let's orient ourselves for the week. What is our goal for the week? What do we want to accomplish by the end of the week? And I think it's just great to have an orienting narrative for the week, for yourself.
I totally agree. And, one major purpose of this show is to educate folks and also encourage folks, whether you're a new writer in the musical medium or you've been writing musicals for a long time. We want to break it down and bring that encouragement and setting goals, setting intention, setting deadlines.
Yes.
That is a huge part of writing anything, which is also why I love this idea of we all need our own I Want song. Great. So let's get into song mapping. Whenever I think we can give a term to one of the parts of the process, it's also so empowering and so helpful to move forward. So how would you define song mapping?
Yeah, so I think there are two terms that we kind of need to define because they're similar, but they mean different things. So one term is song spotting, which is similar to song mapping, but it means something different. So when we're talking about musical theater, the term song spotting is where you're finding moments in the story to musicalize, to make into songs. Like that's what we call song spotting. And then when we get down to the songs themselves, then we get into song mapping, which is basically mapping out your song and the content and the structure, the form of the song, so that instead of just staring at a blank page and starting at line one, which can be really daunting and intimidating, the blank page sort of stares at you and mocks you. You have something on the page. You have a structure, you have a form, you have a fully fleshed out idea that then the actual writing of the song becomes way easier.
Yeah, that's a great point because song spotting is, of course, top level. What are the moments that are asking to be songs? When we song map, where do you like start?
Well, obviously you have to have an idea for the moment, right? So you have an idea for the moment, you know where the song is, you know who's singing it, and generally you're going to know why they're singing it. And in musical theater, our songs typically have to take a character through some kind of change. They're ending the song in a different place when they're starting it, as opposed to a pop song where most of the time we're sort of living in a moment. A musical theater song will move the action or the character forward in some way. So once you know the basic idea of what character is singing the song and why they're singing it, the very first thing to do is to come up with the hook idea.
Stand still.
Stand still. There you go.
That's the hook.
There's your hook, right? The hook, I think, is the hardest part of the entire thing because it has to be just right. It has to be the center of gravity of the song, and everything else in that song has to feed that hook. We call that in my classes, we call it the hook monster, and all the lines have to feed the hook monster. So that's what I tell my students generally. And it's hard to come up with that. And what I will generally have my students do is come up with a list of 10 potential hooks, because I think a lot of times the first one is not the right one. You take sometimes iterations to get the right one, to land on the right hook.
When I think of hook, I'm thinking of it as that phrase that I know I can do a couple things with. One, it encapsulates the idea.
Yep.
I'm just going to keep going back to stand still for now. But also I know immediately that that set of words can evolve and sometimes take on different meanings. And that, so that maybe when you first say stand still, maybe you're speaking literally, right?
Yep.
It's literally stop moving. But then maybe the next time you come back, maybe it's more emotionally or intellectual, like you need your head to stand still, your thoughts to stand still. Not to mention there's room to play around with still standing. So I'm looking for a hook where I know there's mileage that we can get out of it. Is that also how you're thinking about hooks?
Yeah, generally. And you know what? Those are always my favorite kinds of hooks. And it's not always possible to land on one of those, but when you can land on a hook that can feel different in, every time you land on it, it means a little something more, or it means a little something different. That's a gold mine. Like that's where the gold is. That's like the holy grail.
But to your point, yeah, there's a lot of hooks that aren't that gold mine hook, but they're still incredible. They have a solid encapsulation of what the character is experiencing in that scene, feeling in that scene. It is the core part of the scene. There's a saying that is something like, in a song, you can say in one line what was said in 3 pages of dialogue in the script or something, right? Have you heard that phrase?
Yeah. Yep.
Because that's the power of a well composed and thought out lyric, is it just packs such a punch. And the hook is sort of that most core version of that.
Yep.
And
Agreed.
of course, I love the lists. I mean, we all know Sondheim was a big, list writer. And I find whenever I actually take the time to write down a list, it's incredible how much more you can mine out of a song, out of a scene,
Very
out of a
true.
character.
Yeah, it makes a difference. And my students will sometimes complain about it, but when they actually do the work, they find, oh yeah, there's a reason for this. I can see why that works. It just works. And sometimes your first idea is going to be the right one, but not always.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. But also by writing out that list, it allows you to keep coming back to that
Yeah.
first idea. Other times it evolves and then you find it. So once we have a hook though, like the next thing is probably the form of the song.
Yeah, the form and the structure. So one of Sondheim's 3 tenets is content dictates form, right? So you have to think about what the context is of what you're writing. So what does the character want? What is the song hoping to achieve? Then depending on what your hook is, some hooks work better in different song formats. Some hooks work better in a verse chorus format and some work better in an AABA. So an AABA song, because you're not repeating a full chorus every time, gives you more real estate to tell a story and to move a story forward, which is why a lot of classic musical theater songs are written in AABA format.
And actually, I mean, this is our first episode, so let's not assume who our audience is.
Yep.
If anyone out there is, more of a beginner, you're still learning, want to make sure we don't go too fast.
Basically, an ABA works like this. You have your first A where you're stating your idea and it contains your hook. Then you have your second A section, which develops that idea or maybe looks at it from a slightly different angle and repeats the hook. And then you go somewhere different. Then the ear is ready to go someplace different. So the B section takes the idea and either, let's say, the A sections are really kind of zoomed in on the microscopic details. Maybe the B section zooms out, or vice versa. Maybe it zooms in, or maybe if the A sections are talking about, this great thing that's going to happen, maybe the B section is what does life look like once that thing happens, or what does life look like if that thing doesn't happen. So we get a different perspective on the hook and of the idea. And then at the end of that B section, we go back to the A section idea. We restate it. We come home, and generally the hook will mean something a little bit different. Coming back to that final A, we feel like we've reached a new place or something has changed.
Yeah. And often in the AABA format, that hook will oftentimes be the last line of the A section, or sometimes it's the first line of the A section. And it's such a powerful form, as you said, for storytelling, because it really is state a thing, state it again, a little bit different, go somewhere else, come back to it. AABA.
Yep.
But then verse chorus being the other form you mentioned.
Right.
Yeah. How would you describe
so
that?
verse chorus works a little bit differently. So in verse chorus, typically, and you can have slightly different versions of verse chorus, but typically you'll have a verse, and then sometimes maybe you'll have a pre-chorus, which is a little bit shorter than the verse, and you'll have a chorus, and you'll go back to the verse, and then you'll repeat the chorus, and then usually there's a bridge, and then another chorus again. So you have usually a large chorus where you'll have a hook within that chorus. Sometimes the whole chorus is kind of a hook, but the entire chorus generally will repeat each time, which takes up a lot of time. And so sometimes it's a little bit harder to use that form to good effect in musical theater. Not impossible, and it is used all the time.
And the verse chorus form also makes perfect sense for pop music because you get to hit that chorus over and over again, and we all learn the lyrics and we sing along and we dance or whatever it is. It works so well for that. And I know we're kind of oversimplifying things and being a little tangential here, but at the same time, it's this reminder of these different choices we can make, but also these different structures that I love diving into because it's a reminder of what works within the medium. What is the function of the song? Why do those verse chorus songs work? And why does the time fly by in certain shows when, even though they're repeating the same chorus over and over? And why maybe in other times does it not work? As a screenwriter and coming from the film side, there's also the economy of the page is so important that you usually do a pass where you cut every piece of dialogue or every scene that isn't imperative, right? And so then when you just look at a song, it's like, well, why are we repeating these 4 lines of the chorus when you would never do that in dialogue, right? I love taking a moment to break that down so that we can intentionally choose whatever form we decide to go with.
I love that you mentioned having a chorus repeated and it's not giving us any new information. I think that's the important thing, is that we should always be getting new information in a musical theater song, especially because time is limited. And if we've already heard something, we already know something, then we don't need to be restating it over and over again. We need to be learning something new.
Which brings us back to song mapping.
Yes.
So once we sort of have our hook, we have our form, and what's an example? We've sort of actually been going into this, but like, can you give an example of how you would start to map that out?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to pop into Over the Rainbow? I can use that as an example and walk people through like how what a song map might look like or sound like.
I love it. Also because Over the Rainbow is from a movie musical. It's not originally from the stage.
It's true. So looking at a song like Over the Rainbow, here's what a song map might look like, might sound like. The song starts with the hook, right? Somewhere over the rainbow, way up, right? Okay, so a song map might look something like, okay, you have your first A section. We'll call that A1. So we know we want to start with Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And then the writer might make some notes like, okay, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, something about where it is. So we'll be keeping it general for now, but knowing that we're going to write something about where Over the Rainbow is. Then we have the second A. Again, we have Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which repeats the hook. And then maybe what's it like there? We develop that idea a little bit. And then for the B section, maybe we have some more specific imagery. We can see what that looks like a little bit more clearly now, which then evolves into the lyric, troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. I mean, those are really specific images that we didn't get in the first two A sections. And then that leads us back to a restatement of the A, where the hook comes in again, somewhere over the rainbow. And then maybe we're talking about why we're still here and why we can't travel there. Maybe we're asking a question. Why? At the end of that final A section, she says, birds fly over the rainbow. Why, oh, why can't I? Which is the first and only time in that song that we're asking a question. And the song ends with a question, which is really powerful. So if you make your song map that way, it gives you these little moments to hit. And then when you go to flesh it out, you're not doing quite as much work because you already have the plan out.
What you're talking about is like, how can I tell a little story within this song based on this idea? That is song mapping. I don't know what the song is, but I want to lay out a map that will give me an angle to approach the first A, the second A, and where to go. And where Somewhere the Rainbow ended up, it starts as a very abstract, distant thing, but then it becomes like a wish that she wants, and then it becomes more tangible, and then it becomes something physically capable for birds, but not for her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is an arc. That's where they got. I don't know how long it took them to write that tune.
I don't know either, but it's a good one.
Would you be open just to, like, I think further dive into song mapping and give an example not connected to an existing song? There's a little curveball I'm throwing at you. If you and I were trying to song map your I Want song, Stand Still, I keep coming back to that, how might we do it? Because it's easy to look at a song that's already written and go back, and I want to make sure anyone listening, especially, on the educational side, we give them like an actual example of how we might do that for a song we haven't.
Yeah, sure. So Stand Still, the image that sort of comes into my head is somebody, standing stationary while everything is like zipping by them and changing in, right? So that's kind of the image that I get. And so since songs kind of thrive on sense-bound images, maybe I might be tempted to go towards more of like a list song feel. So maybe it's like, flowers bloom and die, and snow, it covers the ground and then goes away, and the sun comes out and the clouds, and then it's raining, and it's like things are going by and everything is going by, and then
everything has movement. Right. Everything has movement and motion.
Right. And I might connect that to nature first as a way of being like, big and out, and then we get the standstill hook at the end of that first A. And then maybe the second A is like, my kids are growing up really fast, or, the things in my life that are happening. And so then we sort of bring it in a little bit. So we're sort of zooming in a little bit.
Nature is the state of the world is moving. Literally, the earth is spinning. Right. And I need to stand still. and then my life is moving, 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 trying to keep
Yeah.
up with my kids and my job. I need to stand still. Great. Love that. So where would we go for the B?
Oh, you could do a number of things with the B. So maybe the B is, what would life look like if I could actually slow the things down around me? Or what would life look like if I could really take the time to take everything in? What would it look like if time did slow down a little bit? I could go into what the vision of that world might look like in a B section.
Yeah. To what you were saying before, it could even be less of a what if and maybe more of when I stand still, I can do that. Like you're setting that intention for your journey, right? You're saying, if I could stand still, I would get XYZ done, or I would do this, or I would be myself. Hey, back to my,
There you go. See?
and so, but then where could we go with the last A?
And let's see, the final A. Ooh, that's a good question.
My head starts to go to a place of like, how do we actually change? One way to take it that is actually sort of flipped is like, I need to just run a little faster so I can stand still.
Well, that's interesting.
Like, because the world's moving, my life is moving. So I'm just going to make one more lap. I'm going to do this last job, do this last task, and then I can finally stand still, which is also sort of an interesting character thing because we all know that's probably the wrong choice.
Right.
But that's great in storytelling to have your character
Absolutely.
think they know what's right. I don't know.
Yep.
Where were
Yeah.
you going to go? Sorry to
No,
interrupt.
that sounds good to me. I don't know. Gosh, for our final A's, man, my brain needs like processing time. But I would love to also just, we were talking before about how to play with the word still, because still can mean continuously. It can mean standing still. Okay, so I might want to play with the meaning of that word still in a final A and see what I could bring out of that.
You could get to the point of like, and I can stand still. Like I can still stand. So that perfect example. This song does not exist.
Not yet.
Neither of us thought of it prior to this recording. And there's a map. We could start diving in, and I know there's tons of ways to go, which actually brings us, I think, to the next piece. We're not even talking about the music. We're mostly talking about the lyrics. So when you're song mapping, how does that come together, or how do you approach that?
Yeah. So at the most basic level, I will have some idea of whether this is an up-tempo song, whether this is a ballad, or whether it's somewhere in between. I mean, those are basically the three options you have. So I would have some general idea of that. And then typically what I will do after I figure out the hook and after I sort of do some song mapping like we just did in terms of lyrical content in each section, I will then sort of go to the piano and start playing around until I find a sound world or a groove or an accompaniment pattern or something that feels right for the sound of this world. Music is a little bit more ephemeral when it comes to this, a little bit more elusive, and it's harder to like the pure creative act of writing just music is a little bit harder to like put down into a science.
I think that's a really important thing to flag, which is, of course, there's all this math that goes into songwriting, and knowing how chords relate to each other can be super helpful. But also there's just that inherent experience of how does it sound? A C major chord can be played any number of different ways and different voicings, and you turn it into a vamp and it's totally different. So I think there is another note to this, which is mapping can be so helpful from a story standpoint. But I think over mapping or planning the melodic harmonic side maybe is not. I don't know, but maybe it kind of depends on who you are and how you hear music in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And some people will approach this very differently. So, I mean, for example, when Alan Menken and Howard Ashman worked together, largely they would come up with a hook, and then Alan would sit at the piano and noodle around on something until Howard was like, "Ooh, yeah, like that. Then maybe let's start with that." So everybody's got a different process, and in the vast majority of musical theater collaboration relationships, after the hook, the music will come first, and then it's the lyricist's job to sort of hang the words on those notes.
Yeah, that's a great point. So even in this song mapping, right, we're trying to understand where the story would go across the form. But then it's like, okay, let's find the music, because we don't actually know what that A is going to sound like, or even is it going to be 8 bars or 16 bars or whatever it is, right? So it is interesting. It's like, okay, this might be where we're going. Now let's figure out the music.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have anything else you want to share or thoughts on song mapping? I feel we've laid it out.
Yeah, it's been pretty comprehensive, I think.
Again, in the spirit of, this being a show for a whole range of musical theater folks, let us know if you want to hear anything more about song mapping that we didn't cover. We'd love to include that, or have a question. We'd love to do follow up and keep diving in so that we can all keep writing great tunes or just keep enjoying songs differently. That's a thing I love about the MT and what you do, Brett, is you always sort of pull back the layers.
That's right. Entertaining and educational. That's always the goal.
Okay, I think that's the end of episode 1.
We did it.
So great to talk to you.
Likewise.
And for everyone listening, thank you. Please, like, subscribe, follow. Also, we have a Patreon that you can join for free or as a paid subscriber, which also comes with, bonus content and other perks. But it really is the best way to support the podcast. And share your thoughts. Like I said, share your I Want song, right? Anything else, Brett?
Yeah, and of course, speaking of sharing, we'd love for you to share this with a friend or family member who loves musicals. Let's grow the audience. I think we've got a lot of good stuff to share with folks.
Definitely. Thank you so much. This is the end of episode 1 of Showtuned, a podcast about musicals and the craft of storytelling through song. Thank you so much.